Alright, so today we're talking about how in Unity to make your mouse control the camera, specifically when you just want to look left and right. So I'm in Unity, I'm in a new scene. You can totally ignore all the folders that I have down here. So we're going to create a floor for our person to stand on, our player. I don't know about a plane, so I will do a cube. That's going to be our floor. I'm going to position it here y negative 0.5, so it's just below the level. And our position otherwise is 0, 0. Our scale in the x will do like 15, and in the z we'll do 15. The y we can leave it as is. So it's got a collider on it, a box collider, so that'll be our floor. I'm also going to create a new material. I'll just call this floor test. Doesn't really matter. I just want the floor to have a slightly different color, so I'm doing this desaturated blue, and I'm just throwing it on the object just so we can kind of see the floor going on. And I'll rename the cube to be our floor. Our main camera, I'm going to delete, and I'm going to create a cylinder. Actually, I'm going to create a capsule. A cylinder could work as well, but the capsule is going to be our player. And I'm going to create a camera and attach it to the capsule and move it until, well, I guess we're going to do 0, 0, and we'll put it somewhat off the ground. So it's inside our cylinder and it's looking out. And you can see from our game view we're not seeing our body, we're looking right through it. If you wanted to, you could turn off the mesh renderer, and that way you don't see the model. But I like having a visual representation of our player model. So this camera, I'm going to make sure it's tagged as main camera. That way the game engine knows that we have a main camera. And if you use in code, you would type camera.main, it would go to that camera. You could have also taken the main camera from the new scene and dragged it onto there, but I didn't know how it was looking at the scene. So renaming our main camera, and our capsule I'm renaming to be player. I'm going to hit Shift Space while pointing at the scene to make it full screen. Now this is just for illustration purposes. I've got my player character selected. Here's a little bit of our theory if we're gonna make mouse look a thing. If we were to rotate the player when moving the mouse up and down, this is what would happen. Now we don't want that, we just want to look up and down, like you tilt your head. So we just want to make sure the camera tilts up and down when we move our mouse up and down. But for moving our mouse left and right, we don't just want to turn our head, we actually want to turn around in most FPS games. So we want to turn the entire player's body around when we move our mouse left and right. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to write a script, so let's go ahead and do that. Just going to click on Add Component, and I just type in mouse controls, and it prompts us to make a new script named mouse controls. Create and add. It does not matter what you name it, you can name it something else, but I recommend making it something that at a glance makes you know what it is and what it does. Our script showed up in our assets folder. So I'll double click on it, and to open it in Visual Studio, I'm going to need to have some variables. So I'm going to declare a public float, and I'm going to call it mouse sensitivity. And I'm going to default it to 200 F because it's a float. And we can, because it's public, we can change it in the editor if we want to. And I'm going to get a private type of transform called myTransform. And this is going to be referencing our player's body. I'm going to set up a void awake. You can do this in start, but awake works just as well. There's a small difference between the two, but you wouldn't really need to worry too much about it if you're just practicing a little bit. I'm going to set up that myTransform is equal to transform. And this way it is, when it's referring to the small letter t, not capital T, but lowercase t transform, it is going to look at whatever object the script is going to be attached to, so in this case our player. And it's going to look if it has a transform and edit that. And why do we want to edit this? It's because we want to mess with its rotation. Now, what happens if we change the X rotation? The whole body moves up and down, so that's not the axis we want. And same with the Z, it wobbles left and right. Now, maybe you want a lean function in a FPS game sometime, so maybe you want to mess with that sometime. But we're going to want the Y-axis. We're going to turn around the Y-axis, because the Y-axis is the one that points up, and we want to turn around it. So that's the axis that we actually want to affect. I'm going to declare a method that checks for input, so we're going to void check for input. And I need to declare a float mouse x. It's a private mouse x, and it's going to be equal to a private float. It's going to be equal to input, and make sure it doesn't autocorrect you. Input dot get axis, and it needs to be mouse x. Type it exactly like this. So you want inputs dot get axis. So between parentheses and these marks, mouse x, because that's the name of the axis. Capital M, capital X, space in between. Times our mouse sensitivity multiplied by time.delta time. If it's giving you a hard time, you can always just restart to make sure that the solution has been saved in Visual Studio. And then I'm going to say myTransform.rotate, and then between parentheses vector3 dot up and mouse x. Save that. And in order to make sure we actually do check for input, under update we need to check for input. In order to help show you that we can look around, I'm going to create a cube and move it around our scene. And I'm going to create another cube and move it a little bit over there. So in order to show you that we can now look around to different things, I'm going to press Shift space on our scene or our game view. And if I now press play, okay, so I had to click on the scene, but if you see, if I move my mouse left and right, if I move up and down, nothing happens. If I move left and right, it will look to the left and to the right. If you had attached this same script to the camera, it would not have worked. And that is because the transform it's looking for is this transform, the transform of whatever it's attached to. If you were to attach your mouse look script to your camera, again, you can do that, but what you would want to do instead of having a private transform, myTransform, you would want to do a public transform and call it player body It doesn't matter too much what you call it, as long as it's something that you'll recognize. And instead of myTransform.rotate, you want to do playerBody.rotate, and then the same vector 3.up and mouse X. So what if to demonstrate you, I'll comment this out, and I will also comment this out, and comment this out. If we go back to the scene, instead of having the script attached to our player, you can see now it has a player body and it says none, and it needs a type of transform. We can remove the mouse control script from our player and attach it to the camera. And then we have to slot in our player's body. So we grabbed from our hierarchy, we select the main camera, we grab the player, and we drag it all the way down to player body and let go. And now it has a reference to what it is going to need to rotate when you move the mouse. So if I make this full screen again, now you see it also works, and we also look left and right when I move my mouse. In the next video, we'll look up and down, and then we'll also start to look at moving our player around.